Okay. Hi everybody, and welcome to PSA Co's live streaming. I have with me today the wonderful Sara Goods. Sara, thanks for joining us today.
Hi.
It's such an honor to have you, and you've given so much to me personally as a director. So it's such an honor that you've been able to take this half an hour little snippet of your day to answer some questions. So yeah, and welcome to anyone else who has joined us today. What have I got? I've got Claire Sara, Emily O'Brien Brown, and a bunch of other people. So welcome. Please remember to put any questions you have for Sara in the comments, and we will get to them as we go along. I'd also like to apologize if anyone starts hearing dogs barking in the background. Those are mine. I will do my best to ignore them. So here, let's just jump right in. Okay, so the first question I have today is, Sara, how would you describe your practice?
Do you mean by practice the actual sense of rehearsal room practice, or just how I approach directing as a whole?
Just how you approach directing as a whole, as in, I describe my practice as a queer aesthetic, queer approaches, and looking at different ways to make from, I guess, more an avant-garde practice. So maybe just explaining.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a really good question because I've worked inside companies for the last 8 years. I kind of have developed a slight aesthetic or sort of practice, which I guess I'd describe as sort of a magnified realism. I don't know, but
yeah, definitely.
a sense of it's always female driven. I try most of all to, either central female characters or female writers, and it's very much a kind of, I guess, a magnified humanism. Really, is how I approach the stories I want to tell, an anthropological kind of approach to listening to what's going on in the world and how I can respond to it as a woman at my age and my time. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's generally it.
That's a really well-rounded way to explain your practice, I would think, because I've seen a lot of your work, and that heightened sense of reality and the human being is very evident. I think especially when Switzerland was a real sense of heightening of those things that you were talking about. So
I guess within that too, Sara, since you mentioned it, it's a real sense of suspense too. Like I'm very drawn to things that have tension in them and a thriller kind of feel to it, that what you're seeing is not quite as it seems. I guess I grew up watching David Lynch films and and all of, and Hitchcock and all of that kind of stuff. And I guess I sort of try and find a female perspective on that, which is more a kind of Henry James has that great quote about, the macabre is the extraordinary woven into the ordinary. It's how everything can look as normal as possible and then suddenly start to feel quite different or alternative. The thing I'm really interested in too is this idea of tilting and tension, but in a spiritual sense rather than in a menacing sense. I think that kind of particularly male menacing, like I was going to do a production of True West and I was interested in examining a bit of that male kind of or macabre kind of aggression from a female perspective. But I guess a lot of the work I do, which I'm really interested in, is particularly like the sound inside. It's the spiritual within art at the moment is the thing I'm most interested in.
Yeah, that's great because it's timeless. that's always going to be something that carries through humanity and time. So yeah, thank you for answering that. It's a very solid answer to the question. Okay, well, this second question might pretty much be tied to the first one, but it was, who or what are you inspired by? I mean, maybe when you were first starting out to now, have those inspirations changed at all, or have they been pretty consistent?
I guess I'm always inspired by people, by people I come across, but my big inspirations to start with were film. I remember specifically starting to go to independent film in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was kind of a huge influence on what I ended up being interested in. But also my first degree was in English literature and specifically American literature. And I did the last year of my degree over in the University of California in San Diego on exchange. And writing and the act of writing, writers, I guess, have become, it used to be filmmakers, and it still is. I love film a lot, and look at, it's always what I'll do when I've got spare time. But writers, I think, I'm reading more and more and more, and I just can't believe what they do. They come up with entire universes from nothing, and really
incredible.
good writers. It's incredible. And really writers can haunt you with a character, like you finish a book and for the next few days you feel like something's missing from your life, like you've lost a best friend or something, or I guess that deeply immersive artistic act of writing is something that I really love to try and find in theatre, because theatre has this thing that film and writing doesn't have, which it's communal. You're in one room together and the temperature can shift and you can all experience it together. And I think that's, what I love most about theatre. I'm very influenced by a lot of the designers I work with, like Paul Jackson and Renee Mulder and Elizabeth Gatsby, Joe Briscoe, Steve Francis. They have very strong, intimate kind of relationships with them on an artistic level. They really influence me, and music. So I listen to a lot of music, and ultimately, I guess what we all try and do, isn't it, is that capture what music can do, which is capture an enormous emotion or human experience without language.
Well, that's it. It's that rhythm that it transcends language completely, because it's such a visceral, effective art form, and to bring that into a theatrical context, it really takes, I agree, it really takes the audience somewhere. With what it is we're trying to achieve as directors, in terms of all the other wonderful notions that you talked about in terms of practice and objectives in making. I mean, if I had it my way, I'd have Kate Bush in all my work, but that's not going to happen, is it? I mean, she is my number one inspiration.
But I think that's what's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I had a very good friend who had her own radio show when we were in year 11, and it was called Deep Joy, and it was on 2SER in Sydney, which is the equivalent of sort of like Triple R, or and we'd go in there at 11 o'clock at night and play records, and one of those was Hounds of Love by Kate Bush, which I still got the same copy. But it's really interesting what's going on with her at the moment with Stranger Things, and the fact that it's gone to the number one. And I've been watching Stranger Things with my kids, and I think the thing that 80s music, or particularly her music and everything, kind of imitated it, was this incredible wells of emotion and feeling inside them that the kids can really relate to, I think. watching that, and nostalgically, you know, we tap into it. But, you know, ultimately you go with music, how does it make you feel? You know, and if it makes you feel something, you remember it. And I think ultimately that's what I keep doing with theatre, is like, how do we make the audience feel something that they don't know what it is, but they know what the feeling is, you know? And I think that's the thing about her lyrics, you know, and that's the thing that actually, you know, strange, the fourth season isn't that great, but what's great about it is that through her music, you understand that Vecna is depression, and Vecna is what so many young people have been through, which is they've drifted away from the world, you know.
Totally.
And the thing that pulls you back to the world is your friend, music, and all of those things, you know, that we cling to in life, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And with Kate Bush, everything is a story. Like it's a story in the music. It's not just, you know, some words being sung. It's like a complete narrative of things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's never one thing. It can never be one thing, you know. I was listening to, you know, Rock and Roll Suicide by David Bowie with my daughter, and it was like, it's so theatrical, you know. His music was always theatrical. It was always big emotions, but ultimately it could be whatever you wanted it to be, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not trying to tell you what it is. I could sit
Exactly.
here
And
and
I
talk
think
about
well, yeah, but really good art, and I think that's in my practice, you just want to make space for that. You want to make space for the audience to fill. And if you're too didactic, and if you're too militant or overtly political, it can only be that thing. And I'm not saying that work isn't important. It's particularly important right now. And, you know, some of the work being done is so necessary and important. But the work that appeals to me, or that I am drawn to, is the one that clears space. It opens up wells of areas you as an
and
audience can then
possibilities.
fill in. Yeah.
I totally agree on all of those comments. Wow, I can't believe the time already. But I do have a question from one of our viewers. I've got a question that Sara actually sent me last week, and it is this. What are some of the main qualities you, well, yourself most importantly, look for in actors?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Someone said, I can't remember who it was, but that sometimes what you're looking for is that intersection between the quality of the person, the actual actor themselves has or embodies, and what the character needs. So you're not looking for an imitation's the wrong word, but you're not looking for someone to just transform into something else. You want them to be bringing something of themselves into it as well. Does that make sense? So it costs them a bit. Like, obviously there's incredible actors that, you know, at the top of their game can transform and you know, totally become someone else. But ultimately they bring something of themselves as well. So like Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I just think is one of the most extraordinary actors ever.
Yeah.
He's totally unrecognizable, but there's always something that's essential about him in each of those roles as well. Not in the way that, you know, some of the other kind of big film actors have, but there's a quality, a kind of energy. So I look for definitely empathy, and a kind of radiating kind of energy of what they're going to give, what they radiate out, I think is really important, particularly in theatre. Catherine McClements, who I just worked with, is just the most beautiful actor. And she has this energy that kind of shimmers off her. Ratismo Mumbo, do you know her? She's a beautiful actor. I'm about to work with in Sunday. She also has it. I remember when I met her, and then she auditioned for something, and there's a quality to her that I just, you know, you want to work with, you know, you want to be in the room. Whatever they create, the character they create is going to essentially come out of that kind of magic cauldron that is them. Bessie Holland is another one, astounding, you know, and you just have to kind of feed in things, and she goes she just
Wow.
brings, you know, she stews it up and creates this thing that just takes your breath away, you know. It's beautiful.
Yeah, there's something about actors who have the capacity to be very confident in who they are and, you know, just allowing themselves to be themselves, whether they know you or just coming into something as daunting as an audition, which I just don't know how actors do it. It's a terrifying thing to be doing, but also the sense of natural rigor, like being a rigorous performer and seeing that rigor has actually been a skill that they have worked on for a long period of time, and you can get a sense that they have this rigorous capacity to use what they have, but also then absorb information externally, whether it's from the text or from the director or from other actors, and being able to work in that collaborative way. And you get a sense of that from someone pretty quickly, don't you?
Very much so. I think that's really true. It's that balance between craft, which you just can't deny in theatre. You need craft, you know, but also generosity of spirit is something that I really look for, because you have to be able to give to your fellow actors. You have to be able to give to the project and people that are interested in the project as a whole, not just their role in it.
Yeah, because it doesn't become a very effective working process when it becomes a one-person show.
One-man band.
A one-man band. It's so true. Oh, right. Another question I've got here is, well, actually, I might from that question go to this one. What are your thoughts on formal training versus just making from instinct / being self-taught?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question in terms of what we just were talking about, because on one level, I think, particularly at the moment, you know, instinct and what people are actually personally bringing to roles is really important and can be self-taught. On stage theatre, I do feel you need craft, you know, and sometimes, you know, what you do get from formal training is that craft work on your voice and on space. Like watching Catherine McClements in The Sound Inside, where she's up there for 90 minutes. She never leaves stage. You know, it's 90 minutes of text. You can tell that woman has just, you know, she has it in space. And the argument, you know, to this question is that, you know, yes, you could get that from just getting more and more work and doing it yourself. But I think what's interesting is that, you know, theatre was always a apprenticeship. And when it was an apprenticeship, people were able to learn from working. And I think that my answer to this question is, if you're lucky enough and talented enough, and it's always a mixture of the two, if you keep working, you will keep learning, you know, and get better and better, of course. But the formal training in its voice, I think, you know, because when I was at STC, I was there when Kate Blanchett was there, and you watch her work and it's absolutely extraordinary. But from the moment she finished NIDA, she was in constant work. Now, that's because, you know, she was very good and very talented, but also if you're constantly working with these incredible people, you're just learning and learning and learning as well. So I don't know, in theatre, voice and technique and having that experience to be able to play and stretch your kind of instrument is really important. And sometimes you just don't get the opportunity to do that on stage when working independently. You know, the pressure of performance and can take away from the ability to just learn through playing and learn through rigor, you know. So
being present,
and being present. So it's a tricky one. Sometimes you know, the schools are very challenging and they're not for everyone.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because before I went to an institution of any sort, I was just directing theatre from instinct and, well, feeling like I had no idea what I was doing. And that was for the first, 13 years of me being a director. But it did get to a point where I specifically remember as directing a play that was incredibly dense in information. It was written in the 80s, and it was the first lesbian play ever put on. It was called Pinball in Australia, and the playwright was completely destroyed by the media because of it. But I just really struggled with knowing how to articulate myself in the room, because I got to a point where I realized that I needed to get some training at some level. So it was that moment when I realized I needed to just get those skills around, just getting some knowledge of the history of theatre and knowing how to answer actors' questions based on those skills. So I think it's like a balance, but I do feel that if I'd gone to the VCA without that, 12 or 13 years of trying to do it on my own, I would have really, really struggled practically in that course. So
well, also,
and
so much of it also is that sense of what you're saying, that you have to know, you don't have to know all of the history, but it's good to know what you're playing with, like I never forget going to the Picasso Museum in Spain, or I don't know where it was, but anyway, that you went through and you saw that he was an incredible drawer before he started abstracting. And I felt like when I went to VCA for that year, we were already doing abstracting when I didn't know what the formality was, so I didn't have the 13 years. So to know what you're playing with, particularly from a design perspective, to be honest, and what theatre, the space of theatre is, and what the history of the space is. And I felt that was the most enlightening thing, was going, oh, I see. These are how people in the past have played with time and space. And this is what they resulted in. And these are the times that they were responding to. And it all started to make sense, rather than I felt like I was going, I might just do this, but having no idea why I was doing it or what it meant to be doing that. And so it was a bit rudderless. And then when I was able to anchor it to think, you might then choose to throw all of it out, but at least you know why you're doing it, or the context of what you're doing. I think that's more, it's the context of what you're doing.
Yeah, totally. It's a lot, you don't feel as terrified. I mean, it's always terrifying directing. Oh, I've got another question. Okay, this is from Emily O'Brien Brown. Oh, Emily, lovely photo. For both of you, what drew you to theatre in the first place, and why this particular medium? Great, very great question. Sara, what do you think?
Well, I started acting, I think, and I did a bit of acting at school, and then I did a little bit more, and then it's very hard because I was always so into film, but I got to theatre definitely because of the immediacy of it, I think, and how it's so present. You have to be so present in it, and the deeply collaborative nature of it too. I think when I'm in a rehearsal room, it's the only place in the world where suddenly I can focus for 6 hours and never lose my focus, everywhere else it's like a bunny rabbit, my brain, it just hops from one thing to the next. But when I'm in a rehearsal room, it just sort of, I focus, and I love people. I love people. That's why I found lockdown so hard. I just really enjoy people and humanity and telling stories about it. So I know other mediums you can do that in, but it's not as rich and as deep as it can be when you're in a room with designers and actors,
I agree. My answer to the question for me would be very similar to what Sara just said. I also started out trying to be a filmmaker way back, and I made 3 really, really, really bad short films for Truck Fest, like shockingly bad. Like couldn't even tell you. Most people couldn't tell me what they were about. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I fell into theatre because I used to work in this photography studio, and most of the people working there were actors. And they asked me, do you want to direct this play? And I thought, oh, play, theatre. Like I really had no involvement with theatre prior to that question. And I directed this kitchen sink bridesmaids business old play. And I was the same, being in the room with an audience and getting that rush of the instant response to something in a room. I would just never looked back from that moment onwards. And I was the same. There's nothing really compares to what it means to be in a room with people and to create something that's immediate and disappears in the way that you can't go back and replay it. But like you were saying, in terms of, you know, getting an emotional response from an audience, that people might not remember the show, but they'll remember how it made them feel. And I think that is knowing that people come and you see them in front of you experiencing something for good or bad, response-wise. You know, there's no other form that can do that. So
Yeah.
It's addictive. And I've tried to want to be a film director, and I just doesn't excite me at all. Well, you know what? It is already 10:30. So I had a few other questions, but I feel, can I just ask you one more question?
Yeah.
It's this last one, everybody, because I don't want to go over time, but it's this one here. It is, what essential advice or tip would you give an emerging theatre director now?
I think the main thing is just to, I know it's daggy, but it's just to create work, just to make sure you keep working. I think I worked as an independent theatre director for 10 years before I got, even an assistant directing job. And one of the things I regret was that, financially it's so difficult. I remember always having to have other work, and I do one show or two shows a year, but I wish I'd kind of thrown more at it and kept working, worked more than that. I felt like I would kind of raise the money and work on the one show, whereas I actually wish I was like working on 3 or 4 things at the same time. I wish I'd been more adventurous during that period to figure out what kind of my aesthetic was or what I was interested in working on. And I wish I'd spent more time working really closely with new writers. I think writers, they're everything, and actors, of course, but who that group is that you're going to start making work with, I think. And just also remember, I was saying this to someone the other day, no one, when they're making work that ends up being significant, like we all want to make work that may impact, or leaves an impact or has an impact, but you can't make work from that place. You've just got to be engaged in the story and the people and the time in which you're making it. And then, when you look at the really significant things, they weren't saying that at the time, it just happened to collide, that work with the times ended up making it a groundbreaking piece, But if you go, we're going to make a groundbreaking piece, you're not going to make a groundbreaking piece, You have to be really engaged in form and in taking risk and in responding to the times and keeping yourself as honest as possible in your motivations and your commitment to the work. Because, the thing we haven't spoken about today is your ego, the horrific kind of brutality of the public arena. All of those things are very, very difficult and very, very challenging. And the self-discipline that's required to keep those things on very short leashes and focus on the work can never be understated. It's hard. It's incredibly hard. But if you just keep coming back to those core things, and just find a way to make it work by keep working, then, you know, that's the best. That's my advice. Yeah.
No, I agree. It is not, there's no sugarcoating being a director or anyone making theatre. It is very difficult, and you come up against so many limitations, but it's looking at the limitations and seeing those as opportunities to actually create rigor in your practice, I think, as well, and not seeing it as an, you know, a stopping, something that's saying stop, but it's saying, okay, there's something in front of me. How can I find a way to go around it, instead of going, there's no way through it or no way around it? And yeah, just never, yeah, I agree. It's just this never giving up and just making the work that you want to make, and know that, you know, the first shows you make will be terrible. I mean, there's just no way around it. It's, if you get a good experience out of it, then it's an achievement, you know.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, if you want to be an artist, you've got to be prepared to be a bad artist first. And the main thing too is just your relationships with people. You will always come around people again and again. So if you have a bad relationship with someone, it will come back to haunt you. You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of directors, I don't want to say a lot of directors, but you often see directors who forget, I think, that it is humanities. It is the humanities, and that
it's a humanities sport.
It is a humanities sport, and I don't know what you feel about this, but I feel personally that directing is 95% looking after and managing people, and you know, nurturing those micro relationships that are constantly, you know, needing to have your attention and your focus, and being aware of those little micro things. And the 5% is the creation. That's why I feel like when I'm making theatre, because if you're looking after the people, then everything else will look, you know, work well. I feel like I see a show sometimes and you can get a sense of the process because you feel the cracks. Something's not happened in the process because the end product is something doesn't sit right for whatever reason. But,
yeah. Well, if you all trust each other, you'll take risks. If you don't trust each other, people won't take risks, and the work won't be pushed in the way it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's 10:36 and I've gone 6 minutes over time, and I don't want to not stick to my word, which is half an hour. So I just want to thank you so much for coming today and speaking to us. This will continue to be available on YouTube. So if anyone has missed out, just go back onto the PSA Co YouTube channel and you'll find it. And please subscribe, anyone watching who hasn't already. But thank you, Sara Goods, for being
Thank
awesome
you.
and such great wisdom. And I will see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.